The pharmaceutical industry, it's just incredible. They give us these modern miracles, drugs that can extend your life, fight off diseases that were once a death sentence, stuff that was literally considered impossible a generation ago. But here's the paradox, the big question, right? What good is a miracle if nobody can actually afford it? So, how did we get here? To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to break down the entire system that sets these prices. We're going to follow the money, we'll uncover how these drug monopolies are built and, more importantly, maintained, and we're going to ask a really tough question. Are potential cures just being left on the table? Let's dive. And this, right here, this really gets to the absolute heart of the conflict. On one hand, you have this incredible engine of miracles. On the other, a system that basically rations those same miracles based on how much you can pay. So how on earth did we get here? Well, we're going to investigate 3 key claims to figure out how this industry really works. All right, first up, let's follow the money. We hear this all the time, right? That these super high prices are necessary to cover the massive cost of R&D, the $2.6 billion price tag per drug. But where is that money really going? Okay, so this chart tells a pretty stark story. You can see there's this massive gold rush happening in R&D for high-profit areas like cancer drugs. But at the exact same time, investment in critical threats, like new antibiotics to fight superbugs, has almost completely flatlined. It's just stalled. And here's the thing. This isn't an accident. It is a business model, plain and simple. Think about it. Cancer treatments, drugs for chronic conditions. They often mean a patient takes them for a long, long time. That's a reliable, recurring revenue stream. A new antibiotic? That's a one-time purchase. It cures the patient, and from a cold, hard financial perspective, you just eliminated your own customer. And that leads to this, honestly, this shocking question from a 2018 Goldman Sachs report. They asked their investors, straight up, is curing patients a sustainable business model? Now, this wasn't about ethics, it was about finance. They pointed to Gilead's hepatitis C cure. I mean, medically, it was a triumph, a game changer. But for the company, their revenue totally plummeted after that first big wave of patients got cured. So the takeaway was crystal clear. Financially, the best business models are treatments, not cures. Okay, so if your whole business model is built around these blockbuster, high-margin drugs, what's the next logical step? Well, you protect them from competition for as long as humanly possible. And that brings us to our second big point, what I'm calling the monopoly machine. How does a standard 20-year patent end up lasting so much longer? Well, one of the main tools they use is something called a patent thicket. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it is brutally effective. So after a company patents the main active ingredient in a drug, they start filing dozens, sometimes hundreds of secondary patents on every little thing you can imagine. The manufacturing process, the color, the delivery device, anything. What they're doing is creating a legal minefield for anyone who dares to make a generic version. And if you want to see this strategy in action, look no further than Humira. This is the textbook case. The drug's main patent, it expired way back in 2016. But the manufacturer, AbbVie, had already built this fortress of over 130 secondary patents around it. They then used this legal jungle to sue any competitor into submission, keeping cheaper generics off the US market for 7 more years. And during that extra time, the price went up, and the drug pulled in nearly $200 billion. But, okay, what happens if a competitor is actually willing to fight through that legal mess? Well, there's another tool in the toolbox. It's called pay for delay. And yep, it is exactly what it sounds like. The big brand name company literally pays the generic company to just stay away. Here's the play-by-play. A generic company challenges a patent. The brand name company, instead of risking a loss in court, comes to them and says, hey, how about a nice cash settlement? The generic company takes the money and agrees to hold off on releasing their cheaper version for a few more years. So who wins? Both drug companies, for sure. And who loses? Well, patients, insurers, the whole healthcare system, everyone who's stuck paying those monopoly prices for longer. And we're not talking about small change here. The scale is just enormous. The FTC estimates these pay-for-delay deals cost American consumers something like $3.5 billion every single year. This isn't some tiny loophole. This is a core part of the business strategy. So all these strategies we've been talking about, they're all about protecting the huge profits from existing blockbuster drugs. But that leads us to an even more disturbing question. And it's our third and final point. What about the potential cures that never become blockbusters? You hear the rumors.
Are they being actively hidden away?
Well, the reality isn't quite the conspiracy theory of a cure locked away in some vault. It's something maybe even more frustrating, a market failure. It's what you could call passive neglect, promising science that, for whatever reason, can't be easily patented and turned into a blockbuster product. It just gets ignored. It's left to wither away in what scientists call the valley of death.
The story of a chemical called dichloroacetate, or DCA, is just a perfect example of this. Back in 2007, some early research suggested this simple, generic chemical might actually work as a cancer therapy. But here's the catch. Because DCA is an old common molecule, you can't get a new patent on it. And no patent means no monopoly. And no monopoly means no way to get back the hundreds of millions of dollars you'd need to spend on clinical trials. So, what happened? No company would touch it. It wasn't a scientific failure, it was an economic one.
So, when you step back and look at it, what we've seen is a system that is designed basically to produce exactly these outcomes. But, and this is a big but, it doesn't have to be this way. And that brings us to our final section, rewriting the rules. Let's take a look at some of the new models that are popping up to fix these exact problems. Okay, so meet DNDi, the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. It's a nonprofit, but it kind of acts like a pharmaceutical company. The huge difference? Their bottom line isn't profit, it's public health. They famously went in and rescued a drug compound that a major company had just abandoned because it treated sleeping sickness, which sadly is not a profitable disease. DNDi took that compound, developed it, and turned it into a life-saving cure. It's proof that you absolutely can innovate without a profit motive. And here's another awesome disruptor, Civica RX. Basically, a bunch of US hospital systems got so fed up with drug shortages and insane price gouging that they just said, fine, we'll do it ourselves. They created their own nonprofit generic drug company, and their whole mission is to make essential medicines and sell them at a stable, transparent, and affordable price. What a concept, right?
Just look at what they're doing with insulin. Brand name insulin can cost upwards of $300 for a single vial. Civica is literally building a factory right now to make and sell it for no more than $30. 30. That one number tells you pretty much everything you need to know, doesn't it? The sky-high price of insulin has almost nothing to do with what it actually costs to make. And this table just lays it all out, side by side. It's so clear. Look at the primary incentive, shareholder return versus public health. Or the pricing strategy, charge whatever you possibly can versus pricing based on cost. And the end results speak for themselves. One model gives you a $200 billion blockbuster drug protected by a legal fortress. The other gives you a cure for a forgotten disease that gets to the people who need it. Which, of course, leaves us with one final, huge question. We've seen how the incentives baked into the current system lead directly to all of these outcomes, from the R&D choices to the patent games. So if we want different outcomes, better outcomes, we have to ask ourselves, how do we change the system itself? How do we build one that values human lives just as much as it values profit?